Hello again, folks. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer.
Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian, our expert on any. Welcome. We're doing this, what's today's date? The 19th of July, guys?
Yes.
So Wednesday before what normally would be our Monday airing on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and it may air next Monday, and then again, it may air subsequent Monday, but it will be on YouTube at what, Media Watch EBT, Bob?
Yes.
Yeah, and then we will also put it up on Facebook and LinkedIn. But kind of a potpourri roundup of interesting stories that we feel we should bring to our loyal fans and followers' attention. And the one that jumped out of all of us, Bob, was that story you came across where good old Dan Rather, still in the trenches on whatever platform, however many different platforms he's working on. But tell us about the brouhaha at Texas, University of Texas. Which of those Texas colleges was it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you're right. It was a newsletter by former CBS News anchor Dan Rather, who's still staying relevant these days on social media on with his comments. But he does a newsletter called Steady, and it's a good one. I would look it up. You know, we don't recommend things that often on Media Watch, but it's a good read. Yep. And he had a very interesting newsletter called Texas Shame on the appointment of a Black woman to be the next journalism director at Texas A&M in College Station, Texas. And her naming was received with a lot of fanfare. She has a long history of journalism, multiple degrees, multiple awards, and they were quite happy to get her at Texas A&M.
Yeah, the dean said, you know, just what we're looking for.
Right. Yeah.
She's an alumni of the college as well.
Exactly. She had graduated from that university,
right.
And they were trying to revive a journalism department, I guess that was in Malays, which hadn't been, running. She was the right person to bring it back to life.
Give our viewers her name because it's a name worth marking.
Sure. Dr. Kathleen McElroy. Mm-hmm. And yes, if the name sounds familiar to New Yorkers, yes, she was at the New York Times for a while. She left in 2011. Mm-hmm. And that apparently was part of the problem, but I'll get into that in a second. But yes, so she's appointed to this position, and almost immediately there are some underground, behind the doors, under the table problems brewing because some conservatives thought that she was brought there for the sake of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Never mind.
The reactionary pushback.
Yes, from the far right at the university. And she went from getting a contract, a long-term contract to be the new director, and it ended up being after all the shenanigans behind the doors, it ended up being a 1-year non-tenure contract. Now, there's nobody on this Media Watch screen that would accept that contract for any kind of job. A 1-year, no tenure contract.
She already has tenure at Texas Austin.
Yes.
She's not giving it up for a 1-year temporary job.
Exactly. I neglected to mention that. She's a professor now at the University of Texas at Austin.
With the credentials that she has, that basically was an insult, which is exactly what they knew. So you know what the end game was, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that was the point. Offering an insulting contract of that level was an insult. But let me just pull out one quick quote from from Dan Rather's piece. I thought it was very illuminating. And let me just all right in the middle of his newsletter. Then suddenly everything changed, except, of course, Dr. McElroy's qualifications. She said the university's interim dean of liberal arts, Jose Luis Bermudez, let her know that reactionary political forces were challenging her appointment. I said, this is, they're quoting from the New York Times. I said, What's wrong? Dr. McElroy stated in an interview with the New York Times. He said, "You're a Black woman who was at the New York Times. And to these folks, that's like writing for Pravda." I mean, that just puts it in a nutshell. For those who don't know, Pravda is the organ of Moscow. That's the Russian.
State propaganda organ.
Yeah. And so this absolutely insulting, racially motivated, pulling of this appointment is just egregious.
Basically.
She's absolutely qualified for this spot, and the conservatives got to the process.
What does that remind you of, guys? Remember the 1619 project co-editor, instigator, originator, who was offered similar position in Carolina, University of North Carolina.
Also a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Meaning,
We're talking about people.
These are Black women with phenomenal credentials.
Yes.
And then they come back and pull her tenure off at UNC, and she just said, "I don't need this."
Right. And to be clear, that's Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project. That's and yes, as qualified as a journalist can be, and a researcher and an educator. So
a New York Times person, right? Yeah. So for Black women, high-end credentials and New York Times credentials are a kiss of death. They want to put you at the top of a journalism school in the South. It might not be a kiss of death elsewhere, but in the South, where they have some hard reactionary right-wing folk, it's the kiss of death.
No, and I don't have the journalism teaching credentials that Alan has, but I taught briefly at Long Island University. I wouldn't accept that contract, a 1-year non-tenure, we can kick you out whenever we want to contract. That was a terrible insult.
No, I just think it underscores that the anti-woke campaign is a racist campaign. And it's not just that they object somehow that the woke people want to indoctrinate. They're the ones who want to indoctrinate. And it's very, very dangerous, very frightening. And we've seen that in other things as well, in Montana, and you were talking about it, and then in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Efforts to gag, to silence any discussion of really legitimate matters.
Let's pick up on that, Alan, because the red state right-wing Republican legislators who influence some of these college decisions, influence all these discussions about no CRT being taught in schools, influence what kind of anti-LGBTQ laws are being rammed down their state legislatures. The latest that was brought to our attention was the Montana legislature. The GOP basically in Montana silenced their colleague, a young lady by the name of Zooey Zephyr, state representative, first openly transgender woman that was elected to the Montana legislature. They did not let her speak in any of the debates for the last 2 weeks of their session because she spoke out against a bill banning gender-affirming care for minors. They actually banned her from speaking on the floor in their chamber. What she was elected by her constituents to represent them. What with this banning a state legislature? But of course, we've seen recent examples of that. Alan, it was what, Tennessee?
Yeah, Tennessee, because two legislatures were banned for challenging gun violence. But this
lack of gun violence legislation, right? Yes.
As a long right-wing tradition in the United States, very few people are aware of it. And I know, Eric, you were joking. Probably the people who are gagging these people are not. But in the 1830s, the United States House of Representatives had a gag rule that prevented discussion of slavery in the House of Representatives.
Yes.
That was in place till 1844.
Yeah, I think that actual gag order played a role, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, in that whole caning incident when that Southern whatever guy caned, was it Seward?
Sumner, but
Sumner
Oh,
on the
that
yes.
floor.
happened over a decade later.
Okay.
Yeah, but my point is, they were still upset when somebody would bring up anti-slavery legislation in those chambers. It's unbelievable.
And just to be clear, in Montana, so all she did was speak out against the legislation that was coming down the pike. So that's what she did.
Yes.
She didn't throw a can of paint. She didn't throw a fit. She didn't disrupt the proceedings, which is what they said in Tennessee.
Nope.
She didn't do any of that. All she did was oppose the far right legislation. And for that, not only, and I just wanted to point this out, by not being able to talk on the floor, her comments can't get into the public record, which is important because that's what you need if you're going to, bring an issue to court. You're going to, use the minutes of the meeting or for further legislation. So by silencing her, they take it off the record, which is another level of, well, I'll use clean language for Media Watch, BS.
Well, it's not that the public record also is used by media, by newspapers, by TV to get the quotes about what was actually said in the debate.
Correct.
So by gagging her, you were able to cut her out of the coverage.
Yes.
Exactly. As local coverage disappears and then remote coverage relies on these public records. Right. You're absolutely right, Eric. Alan. the record, I get you guys confused. I get the by taking it out the record, you lower the ability to report on it.
Yep. Look, we've got this trend. We see the similarities, and this reactionary right-wing gagging, stifling, muzzling, passing anti-laws that restrict people's freedoms, the anti-abortion laws of the sweeping red states, the anti-LGBTQ laws of the sweeping red states. Basically, these people get into their ideological power structure frame of mind. They want to keep control of these legislatures. They want to ram whatever they think fits their constituents, whether it's the state's constituents or total constituent, whatever their ideological stuff is. And so that's basically half the reason why they started this plan for the fake state legislature, electoral college representatives across the country to try to prop Donald Trump and keep him in power. Well, turns out that the state of Michigan decided, okay, you did what you did. You signed these documents. You put your names on it. You actually signed it, and you actually tried to proffer them as correct documents when you knew they weren't. So that's a felony. And we're going to charge you with committing a felony. And so the Michigan's Attorney General said, we're not letting these people get away with this stuff. We're charging them. And of course, 16 people. Anybody got the handle on?
16 count, 8 people, I believe.
No, 16 people, 8 counts.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're right.
People, 8 counts.
You're right.
And those counts are some serious counts. They are liable for some serious prosecution. And it's not slap on the wrist kinds of prosecution. Of course, a lot of them are high-ranking people in the Republican Party in the state of Michigan. One, I believe, was a former chair or current chair of the Republican Party in the state of Michigan. One is married to a state representative, a Republican state representative in the state of Michigan. And so basically, they thought they could get away with this canard, charade, whatever you want to call it, with the fake electors. And now the chickens are coming home to roost and the charges are being filed. And I know Michigan is the first one I've heard of charges being levied, but Georgia, in the prosecution of their attempt fake legislatures, they've got a lot of people that they have brought in to their grand jury, some of whom got immunity to testify because they wanted bigger fish, but not all of them got immunity. So I'm looking down the pike, and I think there are going to be some fake electors being charged in the state of Georgia. And I believe, who knows what's going on in Arizona? You guys seen anything about how Arizona is handling their fake electors?
I was looking at the Republic, the Arizona Republic, before we went on air, and they were reporting that they don't have any evidence of any actual charges being worked on, but they said that the people who posed those fake electors are probably under scrutiny, just based on what's happening in Michigan. I mean, we said that on air back when the Arizona people met out in the open air at a folding table in front of the Capitol.
I remember.
To try to put together these lists of electors, and we were laughing at the stupidity
of doing that.
Yes.
Knowing that something was going to hit the fan later. I remember we were talking about.
And we did that on this show, and they had the abject stupidity not just to put together the slate of electors, but they sent it into the National Archives.
What's that phrase? Signed, sealed,
yes,
delivered.
Yes. It's
what's striking is up till now, the big fish have not been indicted for the January 6th business, for all these efforts to steal the 2020 election. But we do know that as of this moment, Donald Trump has received what they call a charging, not a target letter,
targeting
warning him that he's likely to be brought up on charges, and that may actually happen before this is broadcast. One of the things I'm wondering is if these small fish are going to be used to turn them, because there's overwhelming evidence right now, it seems, against him, that the special prosecutor was not going to bring those charges if there wasn't the evidence. But we may start seeing these small fish in Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, saying, I don't want to go to jail for 15 years for what that guy promised me.
Yeah, you're right about that, in that I remember reading stuff on the Georgia case where some of those fake electors were called into the grand jury and were actually offered immunity for testifying. And that's because I believe Fani Willis in Georgia doesn't really care about the fake electors if she can get them to help her get the big fish. So I think you're fully correct on that, Alan. And I know the stuff I read on Georgia, they were going down that path, bringing those fake electors, people, giving some of them immunity to get testimony. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because there was a motion filed by the Trump team to throw out the charges, the Georgia charges. And the judge said, no, these charges aren't getting thrown out. And then in the Jack Smith case, there's a motion still before the judge about when is this going to go to trial? Because they all want to push it back beyond next year's presidential election. The judge said initially she wanted a speedy trial, but no ruling has come down yet. So I heard someone last night talking about all these various hanging chads. The phrase she used was, we're going to need an air traffic controller to deal with all of these things about to come in on Donald Trump, to keep track and make sure they don't all collide with each other and keep them in order, because they're all coming together almost at the same time. So this guy's facing 3 possible indictments, and he's taking full advantage of it, because before anybody else talked about that possible charging letter of intent information, he went up on his social platform to say, hey, I'm going to be charged and arrested. Because he knows every time he says that, he raises a ton of money. So he was the first to tell the general public, because he told his MAGA followers, this is coming, folks. And he knows that when he says that, more money is going to flow into his coffers. What does that say for the rest of the Republican field? This guy's out raising them just because he's an indicted almost felon. And if he's found guilty, he's indeed a felon. And he's still out raising his competition in the Republican primaries.
Well, maybe DeSantis ought to go get a speeding ticket or something. Something that drags him through the courts, because from what I read and what I've seen, he's actually a little short of liquidity, as they say. He's spending cash a little too fast, and he actually had to lay off some campaign workers.
But he's the next highest fundraiser behind Trump. Behind the T-Rump guy, he's the next highest fundraiser.
Yeah.
Everybody else in that pack is way behind.
What a lot of people don't realize is that you can run for president while in jail.
Yes.
It
yes.
actually has happened once before. During World War II, Eugene Debs was sentenced to jail because he opposed the war. And
he was on the ticket and he didn't take his name off.
He ran for president as a socialist in 1920, and he got almost 1 million votes. So you can run for president while in jail. It's not clear if you're elected, you can take the oath of office while in prison.
But you can run. There's precedent for that, and there's nothing in the law that says you can't.
I'm worried about having a Western White House at Alcatraz. But you're right, and we've discussed this before. No matter what charge he gets hit with, the needle doesn't move. His supporters are his supporters, and they'll say the same thing. Oh, I'm all for Trump. Why? Well, they can't explain it. Yeah. Look, they're all for Trump.
When Mike Pence spoke at some kind of evangelical rally in Iowa, there was a woman who was interviewed who was she had challenged Pence. Why didn't you give the presidency to Trump? So she was interviewed after, and they asked her, well, hasn't anything changed your mind about this? And she said, no, all the court cases went Trump's way. Now, there were 80 court cases, and they all went against Trump. And she was clearly oblivious.
He lost all of them. He got a minor victory about one little subset in one of them, but he lost all of them. And you're correct, close to somewhere between 64 and 84 cases. Yeah. We'd have to go back and pin it down, but he lost all of them. And these people, they live in a different universe. And I don't know, people keep saying, and I read all these different organs, and they keep saying we have to engage with these people. We can't write them off because the only way we might be able to salvage them is to engage. And I say, how can you engage with people who do not believe actual facts and truth and call it propaganda? Alan, you're a historian, you're an educator. How do you engage people like that? This is a serious question. I'm stymied.
Look, in the 1930s, Goebbels, who was the Nazi minister of propaganda in Germany, came up with what he called the big lie. The bigger the lie, the more people will eventually believe it. You just keep repeating it. And they were masters of propaganda. It's almost as if Donald Trump is playing by their playbook.
Not almost, he is using that playbook. I mean, we've talked about this on Media Watch before. The big lie, stick to it, double down, triple down. And a lot of the GOP are using that playbook. The guy who actually is doing it now better than anybody else is Santos, George Santos. He's just like, oh no, that's not me. Oh, I didn't do that. Oh, and let's take care of business. Forget all that stuff that's in the past. What lie? Who told that lie? What? Who? Me? Big lie guy. And he's actually winning. Now, the Republicans are very upset because one of the Democrats, I forget, New York House of Rep guy, I forget his name.
Hakeem Jeffries?
No, Hispanic young man.
Okay.
The first outwardly gay. What's his name?
Torres. I think it's Rafael Torres.
Yeah, I think it's Torres. Richie Torres. Yes. He putting a motion through the House to censor Santos for all his lies, to call him on the carpet, to do whatever the House can do to let him know that all the egregiously bad stuff that he did to get elected is not acceptable. The Republicans seem to want to make it acceptable. These guys are saying, why should we accept this? This is beyond the law. The man may be up on charges for money laundering and X, Y, and Z, and you're just sitting back saying, oh, it's okay because you lied, you got here, we should accept you. No, Torres says, no, we're not going to let this fly. So guess what? The Republicans are saying, no, not in our House, because guess what? They still have a majority in the House. So this is an uphill battle that he's fighting. Let's see what happens. Maybe there's some Republicans who go, oh yeah, that's a bridge too far. Maybe we should join this, but I don't think so. How much time we got?
We have 2 minutes left.
It's not, unfortunately, it's not just the Republicans who push conspiracy theories and unwarranted claims. In the Democratic Party, Robert Kennedy Jr., the son of Robert Kennedy, former senator from New York, is challenging Biden, and it claims to be challenging Biden for the Democratic nomination. It's not clear what's going to happen with that. But he was caught on an interview where he claimed that COVID might have been manufactured so that it did not impact on Chinese and Ashkenazi Jews, but only targeted white people and Black people. And I'm listening to this. This is insane. Among other things, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, and I had a really bad case of COVID. And my son-in-law is an Ashkenazi Jew, and he had to be hospitalized. I mean, that was just crap. And so you get this kind of conspiracy theory all over the place. And very scary.
Guess where his money's coming from? And guess whose show that was on? One of Steve Bannon or somebody.
Oh, wow.
So one of those people. So, and a lot of his money is coming from Republicans because they want to throw a monkey wrench into Joe Biden's reelection campaign. They understand that there's magic in the Kennedy name. And so they're running behind this crazy man to give him a lot of money. And a lot of people get upset when you call him a crazy man because he's a lawyer. He can articulate positions quite well. And so they say, what do you mean crazy? Well, anybody who actually believes in those kinds of conspiracy theories are a touch off.
Yeah.
Not smart, maybe a lawyer, but he's a touch off.
Yeah, and with that, I think we're about there.
We're about out of time, folks. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm the guest and friend, Alan Singer. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Singer. And folks, catch us on Media Watch EVT, YouTube, and we'll catch you the next time.